On a wind-blown morning in El Paso, Texas, I shuffled into the Sunmart Express just after sunrise. The desert wind scraped sand against the windows like a slow whisper. My cane clicked on the tile floor, steady and deliberate, a rhythm I'd long since memorized. In my left hand, I held a small wooden shadow box, pressed glass front, the edges worn from years of shelf dust and silence. Inside, 6 medals, 2 ribbons, and a small photo of 4 men in jungle fatigues, one of them smiling awkwardly, me. I wasn't in a hurry. I hadn't been in a hurry since 1983. I moved slow, not from frailty alone but from habit. When you've survived long enough, even silence starts to feel like company. The store was mostly empty. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting a pale yellow glow over rows of snack cakes and off-brand laundry detergent. I went straight for the orange juice, the good kind, with pulp, and then scanned for the local paper, folded and thin, tucked near the lotto tickets. At the register, the kid behind the counter, high school age, maybe early 20s, wore a name tag that read, Brad. He had a mess of blonde hair under a backwards cap and a look on his face like everything in the world was a little beneath him. He glanced up as I approached, and then his eyes landed on the shadow box resting on top of my groceries. He squinted, leaned forward. "What's this?" he asked, tone mocking. "Where'd you get these, Comic-Con?" The words hit harder than they should have. But I didn't flinch. I'd flinched once in 1970. That was enough. I said, quietly, "Firebase ripcord." He looked confused for half a second. Then he snorted. "Firebase what?" He turned slightly, making sure the only other customer, an older man in a USPS uniform, was within earshot. "Dude says his medals are from Firebase ripcord. Sounds made up." The cashier chuckled to himself. No one else joined in. I waited. Sometimes people remember themselves. Sometimes they don't. Brad shifted uncomfortably, tapped a few keys on the register. $8.99, he said, then added under his breath, "Fake medals surcharge." That one cut. No one spoke. The store went silent. A woman wearing a nurse's badge glanced up from the soda machine, then turned away. The man in the postal shirt suddenly became fascinated with a rack of beef jerky. I looked down at my cane. My hands had started shaking, just a little. No one said anything. No one stepped forward. It wasn't the first time. But today. I'd brought the medals with me. The door clinked shut behind me as I stepped out into the morning glare. A gust of wind caught the corner of the newspaper tucked under my arm. I held the shadow box tighter, not for fear of dropping it, but because it suddenly felt heavier than it had a moment ago. Outside, the light was stark. Dry. The kind that bleaches color from everything and makes you squint even through sunglasses. My truck was parked near the edge of the lot, next to a row of newspaper bins that hadn't been filled since last year. Dust gathered in the corners like time that had no place to go. I didn't look back. But I heard the laughter, muted now, floating faintly from behind the glass. Inside the box, the bronze star sat in the upper left corner, dull under its plastic mount. Next to it, the Air Medal, the Purple Heart. A combat infantryman badge. A small black and white photo, laminated and grainy, from July 1970. 4 of us in front of a Huey. Me, Langston, Corporal Moss, and Sergeant Hanley. All of us covered in red clay and jungle shadow. Hanley had scrawled something on the back the night before we lifted out. I never looked at it again. Firebase ripcord was 3 weeks of hell stretched over a summer month. July was the worst of it. Monsoon rains turned the trails into rivers. The mud clung like it wanted to keep you. Every sound in the jungle felt like it was 2 seconds from becoming a gunshot. That night, the one I don't talk about, the radio had gone dead. We were cut off. We had 4 wounded, 2 dead, and no way out but a clearing 2 clicks southeast. I don't remember the hike so much as the breathing, our own, shallow and panicked, and the jungles, which sounded like it didn't want us there. I'd been hit 2 hours earlier. Shrapnel. Left leg. But I didn't stop. Couldn't. I dragged Langston over rocks slick with moss and rain, blood soaking his fatigue pants. Moss carried Hanley's body. Never said a word. I remember that. Not one word. We used a green smoke grenade to mark the evac point. But it was old. It fizzled and coughed out a weak column before sputtering. I remember watching the smoke twist away, thinking, if they miss it, that's it. They didn't. The Huey came in low, rotors thrashing the treetops, and I remember the skid catching mud as it touched down. Langston got on first. I lifted him. Then Moss. Then I turned to grab Hanley's arm. That's when it happened. A mortar hit somewhere behind me. Close. I don't remember the sound, just the pressure. Then the white heat in my leg. Then quiet. When I woke up, I was in Da Nang. Leg gone below the knee. Voice gone for 3 days. My throat had been torn by the scream I didn't hear. I never told anyone what I said during that scream. Back home, I took a job teaching history in Albuquerque. 30 years. AP classes. Mostly juniors. I didn't bring the war with me, not into the classroom. I taught about the Articles of Confederation and the Dust Bowl and the Civil Rights Act, but I skipped over Vietnam when I could. Let them read the textbook. In my classroom, there was a silence I kept like a shield. Once, in 1975, I broke it. A city hall protest. Veterans were demanding better care. I stood at the back, quiet until I saw a photo on a sign. It was Hanley. Someone had painted a target over his face. I don't remember what I shouted, only that my throat hurt after. A week later, I saw a report on the news. Hanley. Homeless. Dead. Exposure. Detroit. I never spoke at a protest again. Now, nearly 5 decades later, I'd brought the medals out of the box for the first time in years. I hadn't planned to. I just wanted orange juice. Something about this morning, the wind maybe, or the silence of my apartment, told me it was time. I wanted someone to see them. Just once. Even if they didn't understand. Instead, the kid at the register laughed. Called them fake. I was halfway to the truck when I noticed movement near the vending machines. A figure sitting low in the shadows, knees tucked up to his chest. Unshaven. Wrapped in a frayed denim jacket. He was watching me. I recognized the stance before the face. Franklin "Zip" Carter. He used to run LZ extractions with the 101st Airborne. Fast roped out of more helicopters than he probably remembered. He'd lost 2 fingers in a night op in '71. I saw it once, the photos. We crossed paths at a reunion 15 years ago. Haven't seen him since. He nodded at me, almost imperceptibly. Just enough to say, I saw. I nodded back. There was another figure, too. Standing by the coffee machine inside the store. A tall man, mid-50s, plain clothes. Not browsing. Watching. As I opened the truck door, I glanced once more through the window. He was still watching me. I knew that face. Carl Benton. He'd been a cadet in '85, one of my AP students. Big dreams. Quiet. Sharp as a tack. I'd given a speech once at an assembly, the only time I ever really spoke publicly in those years. Told the boys in ROTC, respect the uniform, before you ever earn the right to wear it. Benton had listened. He'd gone on to West Point. Now he wore stars. But he remembered. As I placed the shadow box gently on the passenger seat, my hands trembled. Not with rage. Not with shame. Just the weariness of having carried something too long without being able to set it down. That kid in the store had mocked what he didn't understand. But someone else had seen it. Someone who remembered. I started the truck. Behind me, the wind picked up, lifting a strip of newspaper from the ground and carrying it down the empty street like a banner no one saluted anymore. The apartment was quiet when I returned. Always was. I set the shadow box on the kitchen table, where the light from the east window touched it just so. Outside, a dog barked once. Then nothing. The silence of the desert after morning rush, stillness broken only by wind and memory. I sat for a long time, just looking. The metals didn't shine like they used to. The brass had dulled, and the edges of the photo inside had curled slightly. Langston's smile looked out of place now, like he didn't know what was coming. Maybe he didn't. I reached for the paper. The front page carried nothing new. Water shortages. A new chain restaurant near I-10. A city council vote on traffic lights. Somewhere in the classifieds, someone was selling a used harmonica for $5. There wasn't a section for men like me. My classroom had always been my compass. I taught for 3 decades, shaped young minds without ever speaking of ripcord. I taught ideas, republics, revolutions, moral consequence, but I never showed them the underside. I never said, sometimes your country forgets you on purpose. It had been 11 years since I retired. I hadn't been back since. No alumni calls. No school reunions. A handful of thank you notes from students scattered in drawers. And Benton. The one who rose. Most of the kids had forgotten. I didn't blame them. But that store, the boy behind the counter, Brad, he wasn't forgetting. He hadn't been taught. He didn't know what those medals meant, not because he didn't care, but because no one had ever bothered to show him. That's what hurt. Not his laughter, not the surcharge remark. The silence. The way the nurse had turned her eyes. The way the man in the USPS shirt found fascination in a pack of gum rather than in my story. The way the whole store seemed to whisper the same thing, just let it go. I could have said something. I wanted to. But I remembered Hanley. 1975, that moment when I did raise my voice, and it wasn't enough. It came too late. A protest too quiet, too polite. They didn't hear us then. They wouldn't now. So I didn't speak. I stood there, wallet shaking slightly in my hand, and accepted the total. I let the moment pass. That night, I left the shadow box on the table and sat in the dark. I didn't turn on the TV. Just listened to the walls creak under the weight of the cooling desert air. I thought of Langston's last letter, never sent, tucked in my desk drawer. He wrote it before that night in July, said he wanted to be a teacher after the war. Said he wanted to show kids where the lines were drawn, and where they faded. He never got to. I never told his story. I just taught dates. In the morning, I went back to the Sun Mart. Same time. Same orange juice. No shadow box this time, just me and the cane and the steadiness that had gotten me through so much more than disrespect. Brad was at the register again. Same backwards cap. He looked at me, eyes flicking down to the absence of the box. He didn't say anything. Behind the soda machine, partially hidden in shadow, Zip Carter sat cross-legged. Same denim jacket. Same hands folded in his lap like he was still holding a rifle. He looked up and nodded once. He'd been there yesterday. He saw it. And now he was here again. I nodded back. Something was shifting. Near the coffee machine, Benton stood with a paper cup in hand. No uniform, but his bearing gave him away. The quiet authority of a man who'd been called sir by people who meant it. When I stepped to the counter, Brad didn't make eye contact. He rang up the juice. $3.29, he mumbled. I handed him the bills. Still nothing. But his hands trembled slightly. Maybe from guilt. Maybe from the tension in the room. As I turned to leave, Benton stepped forward, reached past me, and set down a card. Military ID. Then another man entered. Then two more. MPs, dressed in formal blues, with sharp caps and cleaner shoes than anyone else in the store. Their faces were still, eyes forward. Would you mind repeating what you said yesterday? Benton asked, softly. Brad looked up, eyes wide. I don't remember. Benton didn't press. He just nodded to the MPs. The senior one stepped forward. Store is now closed for internal inquiry, he said, loud enough for everyone to hear. Staff, please exit the premises. The other customers shuffled out. The nurse from yesterday tried to speak, then didn't. The USPS man didn't look up at all. Brad's face had gone pale. This is a public store, he said weakly. Not anymore, Benton said. He turned to the security camera, then pulled a small earpiece from his collar. You're live, he added. Two camera crews were pulling into the parking lot. One local, one military press. The lights flashed red behind the tinted windows. This gentleman, Benton gestured to me, taught me history when I was 16. I was one of 2 cadets in his class. The only reason I wear these stars today is because of the respect he taught us to carry. Not the salutes. The silence. Then louder, to the cameras now, until this retail chain adopts a public code of respect for veterans, every military contract is suspended, effective immediately. Brad tried to speak again, but the MPs were already escorting him out. Not forcefully. Just firmly. Like they'd done this before. Zip stood slowly from the soda machine corner. Watched them leave. Said nothing. Inside, the store was silent again. Only this time, it was a different kind of silence. A cleaner kind. Outside, people were gathering. Some with cameras. Some just watching. I stayed inside, by the door, cane steady. I didn't speak. Benton didn't ask me to. I had already said enough. The silence was saying the rest. By noon, the photo had gone viral. It wasn't the medals. It wasn't even my face. It was the shadow box sitting on the passenger seat of my truck, taken through the windshield by someone with a telephoto lens. The caption was simple: he brought them for orange juice. They charged him extra. Hashtag shadowbox not costume. I wouldn't have known if Benton hadn't stopped by that afternoon. He knocked once, no fanfare, and stepped into my apartment with a printout of the photo. They want an interview, he said. I said nothing. You don't have to, he added, softer this time. The image speaks loud enough. I turned the page over. Blank. No article. Just the headline. I looked at him. Don't let them turn it into theater. We won't, he said. This isn't about spectacle. It's about memory. The next few days blurred. The story hit national feeds. Letters came, emails, physical notes, cards written in crooked cursive from elementary schools in places I'd never heard of. One was signed by a girl named Amira. My uncle has medals too. I thought they were toys until now. I'm sorry. The company that owned Sunmart Express scrambled. First, they posted a statement: we deeply regret the incident and are conducting an internal review. It was all corporate fog. Words without shape. But the silence that followed, real silence, pressed back harder than any press release. They sent representatives to my door. One brought flowers. Another offered a six-figure check, hush money in the form of gratitude. They wanted to turn the store into a heroes exhibit. Put mannequins in uniform, hang replica medals from fishing line, maybe play voiceover loops of combat footage on tiny screens mounted near checkout. I listened. Then I shook my head. This place doesn't need neon signs, I told them. It needs memory. They didn't understand. But Benton did. So did Zip. We started small. A year later, that same corner store reopened under a new name, Heroes Corner. No fanfare. No ribbon cutting. Just a quiet dedication. Inside, the shelves were familiar, but along the back wall now stood a long oak case, donated wood, no plaques. Just memories. Medals, letters, boots. Real ones. Some worn, some cracked. Others polished and framed. Brad had come back 6 months into the rebuild. Not out of guilt. Out of growth. He asked if he could help organize the display. Said he'd been reading about the Firebase Ripcord siege. Said he didn't know what he didn't know. He started working part-time. Quiet. Humble. He was the one who scanned the wartime correspondence. People brought in letters from their fathers, uncles, grandmothers. Folded paper with ink fading like breath. Brad handled each one like glass. One day, I came in and saw him rearranging a table. "What's this?" I asked. He looked up, eyes brighter. "Just trying something," he said. Sorting the letters by date, then region. Korea. Vietnam. Somalia. Afghanistan. Iraq. I nodded. He didn't try to explain more. That was enough. One afternoon in spring, a little girl came in holding a school essay. Her father, a Navy mechanic, stood near the door, unsure whether to step further inside. I recognized the hesitation. It was the same kind I'd carried into classrooms and funerals. The same one that followed men who came home alive and unsure what home meant anymore. The girl walked up to me, holding the paper. Her handwriting was neat. She wore a plastic bracelet that read, "Honor means memory." "My name's Ella," she said. I wrote about why silence can be louder than a scream. I looked down at the first line. It read, "My grandpa says real heroes don't yell. They just listen hard." I reached into my coat pocket, pulled out an old whistle. It had no shine left. The metal was pitted. The cord, frayed. "This," I said, "used to hang around my neck in 1970. I used it to signal movement in the jungle. When the radios failed. When the shouting stopped. It saved more men than I ever could have." Ella's eyes widened. I handed it to her. "Take care of it." She nodded solemnly. Her father stepped forward, tried to say something, then simply extended a hand. We shook once. Firm. Quiet. Across the room, Zip was replacing a glass panel in one of the frames. He wore a work vest now. Groundskeeper badge pinned beside a ribbon I knew too well. I hadn't asked where he lived. Didn't need to. He belonged here now. Benton visited monthly. Sometimes in uniform, sometimes not. He never brought a camera crew. Just questions. "Do you think it's enough?" he asked once. "What we built here?" I looked around. At Brad, carefully taping a letter back together. At Zip, hammering a frame into place without breaking stride. At Ella, holding that whistle like it meant something. "No," I said. "But it's a start." Outside, the wind lifted dust off the sidewalk and carried it down the street like before. But now, it passed over something permanent. Not a monument. A memory. Summer came early that year. The heat pressed down in long, dry waves, and the wind carried grit through the open doors of Hero's Corner. Most days, I sat by the front display, nothing official, just a chair someone left behind from the old break room. From that seat, I could watch the people who stopped in. Some came because they'd heard about the story. Others stumbled in for orange juice and left an hour later, quiet, changed. That was the thing. We didn't ask people to talk. But they did anyway. One woman came with a bag full of her father's belongings. Vietnam vet. Never spoke of it. She laid the items out on the table like puzzle pieces, a pocket knife, a diary with 2 entries, a Medal of Honor citation folded so many times the corners had become soft. I didn't know who he was, she said. Until after. We archived every piece. Brad set up a scanner in the back corner. He'd learned how to restore damaged photos, match unit insignias, clean up field reports. He said he liked it. Said it made the past less lonely. One morning, I came in to find him staring at an envelope. "Everything okay?" He looked up. This letter was written in 1969. Sent to a mother in Omaha. Her son didn't come home. He handed it to me. The handwriting was clean. The ink a deep blue. "Mrs. Tremblay, I carried your boy from the edge of the perimeter back to base. He asked me to write you before he passed. He said he was proud. He said he wasn't afraid." Brad swallowed hard. I don't know if she ever read this. She did, I said quietly. The act of writing it, that was the prayer. He nodded. That's what we were learning. Every document, every patch, every faded photo, it was a voice. A kind of echo. Not loud, not sharp. But real. The kind that filled silence like morning light fills a dark room, gently, without asking permission. One afternoon, Benton returned. He wasn't alone. Behind him walked 3 city officials and a camera crew from a national station. I stiffened. The cameras still made me wary. "This wasn't my idea," Benton said quickly. "They want to do a segment on what the community's built here." I nodded once, then turned to the officials. "What do you want from me?" I asked. "Nothing," the mayor replied. She wore a pin on her blazer, an eagle etched in gold. "Just your permission to observe." I thought about that. Then I said, "This isn't a museum." She tilted her head. "What is it then?" I looked toward the back, where Zip was sanding a shelf. Toward Brad, who was bent over a stack of postcards from World War II. Toward Ella, who'd come in after school with a new draft of her essay. "It's a listening post," I said. She nodded. The crew filmed quietly. No interviews. No sound bites. Just footage, hands placing letters into sleeves, visitors pausing at the wall of faces, Brad explaining the difference between service ribbons and unit citations. That night, the story aired. No music. No narration. Just 2 minutes of still images and quiet steps, ending with a shot of the shadow box. The response was immediate. We received more letters in 3 days than we had all year. Some from veterans. Others from children. One note, typed on a yellowed typewriter, read, "I always thought no one remembered. Now I know I was wrong." The pressure grew from there. Larger outlets came asking. One offered a book deal. Another wanted a documentary. A production company proposed dramatizing the Sunmart incident. I refused. "This isn't entertainment," I told Benton. "It's consecration." He understood. Others didn't. One investor called. Wanted to convert the store into a full-blown chain. Said there was demand. Said it could be the next big, patriotic brand. I hung up. They called back 2 days later with a 6-figure offer. I didn't answer. When I finally spoke, it was to a local paper. They asked why I refused the money. I told them, "You don't turn a chapel into a souvenir shop." That line got quoted a lot. But the next line didn't. "You don't buy respect. You live into it." More people came. Veterans mostly. Some spoke. Some just walked the aisles and left notes in the box near the exit. We called it the echo jar. Every week, Brad transcribed the notes into a growing archive. Some were only a few words. "I still dream of the smoke. He was my brother, even if no one remembers his name." Others longer. One note filled both sides of a receipt paper and ended with, "Thank you for not forgetting us." That was the heartbeat of it all. We weren't collecting stories. We were returning names to silence. One night, I stayed late. The place had emptied out. The lights were low. I walked the aisles slowly, listening. There was a kind of reverence in the air, the way a church might feel after the last parishioner has gone. As I turned the corner near the display of field journals, I saw Zip. He was standing before a photograph, one I hadn't seen him look at before. It was of a chopper crew in 1971. 5 men. One of them missing a hand. I stepped beside him. "That's Sergeant Deming," he said, voice low. "He flew me out when I was hit. Never saw him again." "You think he made it?" Zip shrugged. "I like to think someone remembered him." We stood in silence for a while. Then Zip turned to me. "I used to think forgetting was easier. And now?" He nodded toward the walls, the glass, the shelves of letters and badges. "Now I think memory is the only thing that makes the pain worth carrying." I put a hand on his shoulder. "That's why we're still here." That night, I walked home slower than usual. I didn't feel tired. I felt whole. Not healed. Just, intact. There's a difference. The first anniversary of Heroes Corner arrived without celebration. No balloons. No banners. Just a slow trickle of footsteps and a silence that settled with the same weight as a folded flag. The morning was cool for July. The kind of stillness that feels like something's about to be remembered. I arrived early, before the sun had fully crested the rooftops. The sky was lavender, the parking lot empty. I unlocked the front door and stepped inside, greeted by the same scent, old wood, paper, brass polish. Brad was already there. He looked up from the back, where he was framing a new letter. He nodded, then turned back to his work. I didn't speak. We didn't need to. By noon, a few others had come. Zip, wearing a clean button-down and the same boots he'd worn since the day we found him by the soda machine. A group of ROTC cadets from the high school, sent by their instructor. One of them paused at the wall of names, tracing a fingertip over a nameplate. "You know him?" I asked. "No, sir," the boy replied. "But I think my uncle might have." He stared at the photo beside the name. "He never talks about the war." I wanted to see if it was real. "It is," I said. He nodded. Then, around 2 o'clock, a familiar sound drifted through the open doors, shoes on pavement, soft and purposeful. Ella had returned, now in 6th grade, taller, more confident. She carried a paper in her hands. "New essay?" I asked. She grinned. "Not really," she said. "Just, a story. We had to write about a moment that changed the way we see the world." She handed me the page. Her handwriting was neater now. The title read, "The Whistle." I read the first lines aloud. He didn't yell. He didn't shout. He just handed me something that used to matter, and now it matters to me. My throat tightened. I handed it back gently. "Thank you," I said. That afternoon, we held no speech. No program. But people came. Dozens. Then hundreds. Some brought objects, photos, medals, boots, journals. Others just walked the rows, reading, kneeling, remembering. They didn't need fanfare. They needed space. We'd made one. A man in his 80s walked slowly around the display wall, paused at the ripcord section. He wore a baseball cap with the 101st patch sewn on, his posture slightly stooped. "Firebase ripcord," he said softly. "Wasn't supposed to make it out." I turned. No one was. He looked at me. Eyes cloudy with age, but sharp underneath. "You there?" I nodded. "Same." He reached into his coat and pulled out a laminated field map. "Carried this out in my boot. Figured it belonged here." I took it with both hands. There were no more words. The day went on. People came and went. At one point, I noticed Brad sitting with a young veteran in the corner. The man was holding a crumpled envelope, tears in his eyes. Brad just listened. That was enough. Later, after the last visitor had gone and the light had shifted to golden evening, Benton arrived. He came in uniform this time. Dress blues. Medals that shimmered just faintly in the dusty light. He didn't speak right away. Just stood in the center of the room, looking slowly from display to display. Then he turned to me. "We've decided," he said. I raised an eyebrow. "The department is adopting a formal initiative. Every base. Every unit. Every ROTC program. A moment of memory. Once a month. 5 minutes. No talking. Just silence." I nodded once. "They're calling it the Price Protocol," he added. I said nothing. "It wasn't my idea," he said quickly. "It came from Ella's teacher. From her essay. From the whistle. That old piece of metal. A threadbare cord. It had survived decades of rain, fire, time. And now, it was legacy. They want to make a monument," he continued. "Something big. Downtown. Maybe marble. Statues." "No," I said. He blinked. "This is the monument," I said, gesturing to the shelves, the letters, the faces. "Not stone. Story." He looked around, saw it the way I meant. Then he nodded. Outside, the sun dipped below the horizon. The shadows lengthened across the asphalt. I turned the lights low. One by one, I moved through the aisles, checking the displays, brushing dust from the glass, straightening a photo here, a note there. Brad locked the back door. Zip turned off the scanner. Benton offered to sweep. We moved quietly, as if in a cathedral. At the end of the night, I stood by the front window and watched the street. Empty. Still. The kind of silence that carries meaning. I didn't lock the door that night. Let the dark hold the place as it was. Let the moonlight brush across the glass where the shadow box sat. Let the silence remain undisturbed. I walked home slow. No cars passed. No voices. Just the quiet of a town finally learning how to remember without noise. In the stillness, I thought of Hanley. Of Langston. Of Moss. The rain-soaked nights and the breathless mornings after. I thought of the boy in the store who'd once laughed, and the man he was trying to become. I thought of Ella. I thought of the whistle. I didn't speak those names aloud. Not then. Not ever. But I carried them. The way we carry memories too sacred for ceremony. The way silence carries a truth that can't be dressed in flags. At home, I eased into my chair by the window. No radio. No books. Just the view of the street, the shadow of Hero's Corner in the distance, and the quiet rhythm of breath. I never said it aloud, but I carried it home in my thoughts. Sometimes silence is not emptiness, but the echo of all the voices we must not forget. And if we remember, if we really remember, then none of them are truly gone.